just can't get enough of them. They're so good.
I love the V-brace. I love the new V-brace.
It's really stunning.
Oh yeah, the sustain is unreal. Listen to that. Yes.
If I were to work here, one thing I would be very proud of is the way they're resourceful, the way they are taking care of the environment. I think that's not a lot of companies boast about.
So when you're working here at Taylor and it's lunchtime, you go to the lunchtime guitar, you pick it up, and you play during lunch.
I was most impressed with the fine work they do.
It far exceeded my expectations.
Oh, it does exceed your expectations. Good morning and welcome to this edition of San Diego People. I'm Carlos Amezcua. You may not realize the #1 manufacturer of acoustic guitars in the United States is right here in San Diego County. You just saw the scenes that we were showing you from Taylor Guitars Factory in El Cajon. And joining me to talk about the San Diego-based company is Julie Gardner. She's in charge of production there. Julie, nice to have you here.
Oh, nice to be here. Thanks.
What a treat to go through a facility that seems so well organized. You're making high-quality instruments there in a very highly kind of industrial setting with all kinds of technology and things. Tell me about, let's start with the origins of Taylor Guitars, because let me tell you a little story. It's nice to have you here, by the way.
Thank you.
Back in the day, in the late 60s, I ran across a guy named Deering who was making banjos, I think in Lemon Grove. And a guy named Bob who was making guitars across the street.
Yep.
That Bob is Bob Taylor.
It is.
And we were talking about him making guitars, and I remember saying something, oh, you make guitars, cool. Do you know anything about banjos? Had no idea that in the future, that some 45 years later, he'd be the great Taylor guitar brand that he is today. What's it like to work there, and what is your feeling about Taylor guitars in general?
It's a fantastic place to work. I really love the company, and it's easy to go to work every day when you really respect what we're doing. So like you said, Taylor started, sorry.
That's okay.
Taylor started in 1974 when Kurt Listug and Bob Taylor both worked at American Dream and in Lemon Grove. Yeah. And the owner decided to shut down the shop. And so Kurt went to his dad, as the story goes, and...
Is that Bob or Kurt?
Oh, that's Bob there.
Yeah, there's Bob. Yeah,
yep.
When he had hair.
Yes. And Kurt went to his dad and said, hey, can you loan me, the money? I want to buy this shop. I think I can really make it happen. And his dad said, well, do you know how to build guitars? And he kind of said, oh, no. And he said, well, find a guy who can really build guitars, and then I'll loan you the money. And that was Bob. And
wow. And the rest is history. Because they actually started building guitars, and there was a guy that I bought some guitars from that core group of guys in the 70s who continued to build guitars privately up on El Cajon Boulevard. So interesting to see that the Taylor brand has grown, and the quality of the guitars that are being made. Now, back in the day, they were made by hand. There was no assembly line. These guys made these guitars by themselves. And now you're in charge of a huge production. I mean, the production facility there is, I think, second to none. I've never seen anything like that.
It's really impressive.
So tell me how that process works. You have raw wood, and you convert it to these instruments. Tell me about that process.
So we have 5 production departments at Taylor. One is our milling department, and they're going to take the lumber in, they're going to chop it up and grade it out. They'll sticker it so it can acclimate, and then they also make parts in that department. So they'll cut out our sides, our backs, our tops, and get those all ready. And then they deliver to 2 different departments, the neck department and the body department, where we're
looking at the neck department there. They're putting in frets there. You see that, yeah.
So in the neck department, they're going to take that blank and take it all the way through the process on these CNC machines. They're going to install a truss rod and add a fretboard, add the frets. They're going to do a final carve also on a CNC machine, and then they'll do a final sand out, tape it up, and send it over to finish. So simultaneously, the body department is bracing the tops and the backs. They're assembling the guitar. They cut a slot, they red out a slot for binding, they bind it, and then they sand it, make it look pretty, and send it over to finish.
You know, as I was watching them go through that whole process, it's very well figured out. You've numbered all of the pieces. And they all have some sort of electronic tracking device. Tell me how important it is to keep quality control here.
Quality control is super important. Quality is the focus at Taylor. So whether we're making, 6 guitars a day back in the 70s or 120 today, quality is number one. So those RFID tags allow us to track the guitars through production. Anything we see on them, we can, note or look at later. And we have an ability to look at those guitars even later after they've left the shop. If a customer calls in with any questions or anything, we're able to look at that guitar's history.
As I was watching your craftsmen, and they are terrifically talented. They're really, really good. Watching them glue the pieces together and with the precision that they have is pretty impressive. And I know Bob was very picky about glue. How do you control the glue from spilling over and damaging the wood or damaging the finished product?
Well, a lot of it is training. So when people come in, there's a lot of work that goes into developing people and honing these skills. And people will come in at different skill levels, and we'll look at that, and depending on where their forte might be, they'll go into the finish department or the body department, the neck department, final assembly. A lot of guitar players will end up in final assembly. They get to try it out before they box it up.
That is so cool. And I have to say one last thing here before we wrap up this segment, that the culture there is so happy. Everyone loves working on these instruments. And when they took a break, they were all playing ping pong. So that goes to what you're saying. You love working there because? It's
a great culture. It's a fun company. The Bob and Kurt are still on campus, every time they're not traveling. So it's just a great place to work and to be.
Well, Julie Gardner, thanks so much for being here, and congratulations. Terrific effort there, and continued success with you at Taylor.
Thank you.
And when we come back right here, to make more than 600 guitars a day, you need a lot of wood. We're going to talk about how Taylor Guitars is doing in part to protect the world's forests that provide the wood that make these excellent guitars. We'll be right back. Welcome back to San Diego People. A San Diego company is doing some great things. They're not only building great guitars, they're protecting trees halfway around the world. We're talking about Taylor Guitars out in El Cajon, and joining me to talk more about how guitar manufacturing can be environmentally friendly is Scott Paul of Taylor Guitars. Nice to have you here, Scott.
Nice to be here. Pleasure.
All right, so let's talk a little bit about, as we toured the factory, we noticed that you can't make guitars without quality wood. And you have people who go around the world looking for the finest specimens you can find, because these instruments require that for different kinds of sounds and the kind of quality guitar that you're making. So tell me about the challenge of finding the right wood, first of all, and then we'll talk about the environmental impact of all of that.
Well, this is an issue that really didn't exist for guitar manufacturers 20, 25 years ago, but increasingly with the slow decay of global forests worldwide, for ethical, environmental, and increasingly legal reasons, we have to pay very close attention to our wood supply. And as you said, we have a team of people traveling the world, developing personal relations, boots on the ground to ensure that the wood that we're sourcing, we don't source a lot, but we do source quality. And we're making sure that that wood is from an ethical, environmentally responsible suppliers.
So let's talk a little bit about that, because I know that you have I guess, is it a tree farm in Cameroon, or what would you call that?
No, we are half owners of a mill, an ebony mill in Cameroon.
And you mill ebony wood there, which is very rare, and in some places protected, right?
Well, it's not rare. It's a bit of a misnomer. People assume tropical forests.
Right.
The Congo Basin Institute estimates that there are perhaps 30 million ebony trees spread out across its range, encompassing about 3 countries. But we have to take it very seriously, and that's part of the reason we've started this replanting program.
So tell me about that program. You replant trees that you cut down. It is sustainable. You can regrow forests. And why ebony?
Well, ebony is fundamentally important traditionally for musical instruments. The fingerboard, that black bit underneath the strings for guitars and violins, traditionally ebony. It's a wood that has been used for various reasons. It's hard, dense wood, tradition, as I said. So ebony is important for Taylor guitars. We had the opportunity to take really direct control of a very important wood for us, ebony. So we purchased an ebony mill in Cameroon. A couple of years into it, we started asking very basic questions about what is the sustainability of this species? How much out there is there? How does it reproduce? And the shocking truth was that the world knows very, very little about this species. So Bob Taylor started funding some basic ecological research through UCLA and the Congo Basin Institute, and we developed a preliminary goal to plant 15,000 ebony trees.
That's amazing. And I understand that a lot of the trees that were there in Cameroon and other places have just been tossed out as waste, and when they were actually perfectly okay to be used and then replanted.
Yeah, that's an excellent story that we like to tell, because for 50 years in the Congo Basin, for hundreds of years, musical instruments have sought ebony that is jet black. Why? Tradition, aesthetics. But in nature, upwards to 50% of the trees that you can cut in a place like Cameroon, you fell and they're not jet black. They're marble colored.
There's a little marbling in the wood.
Little marble. They're beautiful.
Absolutely, yeah.
Acoustically, there is no difference between jet black or marbled. And when we learned that 50% of the trees that were being cut over maybe a 50-year period were being cut and abandoned on the floor because the supply chain was disconnected, and all the people knew that were cutting the trees was the Americans and Chinese and Europeans, they want the black stuff.
Right.
And when Bob Taylor realized that, he said, well, if there's no difference, we're going to start putting colored marble on some of our higher-end guitars. And our customers have responded very positively once they understand the sustainability story behind it.
So when the wood eventually does come to the factory, whether it's this factory or the factory in Tecate, what happens to the wood, and how do you get it to become good enough to be on a guitar?
Well, the wood is all pre-sorted in Cameroon, at least the ebony, if we're talking about ebony. And then there is an extensive process at Taylor. The wood that's of guitar quality ends up on our guitars. We are also pioneering some new product for quality wood that is not music quality, but is appropriate for knife handles or cutting blocks, kitchenware. We're looking to develop new product lines for some of this wood, because ultimately we're trying to provide economic sustainability for the people that work for Taylor Guitars in Cameroon. And one of Bob's fundamental passions is efficiency and not to waste. So if we're able to produce more from less by developing new lines of product, making more money from the same amount of natural resources utilized, then we're going to do that.
It sounds to me like you've been involved in manufacturing and product and sourcing wood for most of your life. I don't know anything about you, but it seems to me that you're very well versed in this. How is this company different from, say, some other places that you may have worked or other places that you have visited?
Well, the truth be told, my entire career has not been in manufacturing or guitars. It's been in environmental policy and advocacy. I've worked at the White House Office on Environmental Policy. I've spent a lot of time at the United Nations.
Oh, that's good to know. So you've seen good actors and bad actors.
I've seen it all.
Tell me about the bad actors.
I ran the Greenpeace Forest campaign for 14 years. And we focused on some of the bad actors and promoted some of the good actors. And illegal logging, looking at natural forests more as a one-time ATM, or looking at the forest as an impediment for the land being turned over to palm oil or soy, is the major factor driving forest destruction. So what's really heartening about working for a place like Taylor, which uses a little bit of wood, but has a big voice, we're a popular, beloved company. I joke that red states and blue states love us equally.
That's right.
We are able to use our bully pulpit to try to drive change, to try to drive some sustainability, so we can get the product we need, we can create jobs, but we will do good for the environment.
Scott Paul, it's called leadership, and that's terrific, and I salute you and your company for that. That's terrific. Thanks so much for being here with us this morning. Still ahead on San Diego People, we've heard from one East County manufacturing company, Taylor Guitars, but there are hundreds, believe it or not, of companies building and innovating around San Diego. Next, we'll talk about the impact of manufacturing in the San Diego region. We'll be right back. Welcome back to San Diego People. Joining me now to talk about how manufacturing impacts the local economy is Chair of the East County Regional Economic Council and CFO of Quality Control Manufacturing, Inc., is Rick Urban. Rick, welcome. Nice to have you here.
Thank you very much for having me.
How cool is it to have Taylor Guitars in El Cajon?
Oh, it's great. I mean, they're known all around the world. There's so much manufacturing in East County, so it's great to have Taylor Guitars and beer and aerospace parts and everything else in East County.
Yeah, so we're going to talk a little bit about that. I want to focus just for a second on Taylor Guitars, since that's been kind of our subject this morning. When you have a high-quality product like that being produced in your area, can you look at and say to other manufacturing companies that maybe want to relocate and say, hey, you want to see a prime example of what we can do in El Cajon, take a look at this. Is that what you do?
Oh, sure. I mean, Taylor Guitars is known everywhere, so you can say there's a reason they picked where we are in East County, because, and you know, a premier guitar manufacturer, they allow you to take tours so you can see it. It just brings something to the region that's hard to get.
Now, manufacturing for a long time has gone overseas. To a lot of these companies say, look, we can manufacture cheaper someplace else, someplace outside of California. Why is El Cajon unique, and why are you pushing manufacturing in your part of the county?
Well, a lot of manufacturing is actually coming back, because the manufacturing, especially in our industry, which is aerospace, that went overseas specifically to China, you know, all of a sudden they found out they couldn't make it like they can in the U.S. And the last thing you want to hear is on an airplane is the part doesn't quite meet the quality or anything like that. And I think the U.S. and Taylor Guitars is a perfect example, as well as us, is you make it more efficient, you can make it less expensive here in the U.S. Your sourcing is closer versus going overseas. So actually manufacturing is calling it, they call it now near sourcing, where it's coming back onto the U.S.
That's really interesting. I know that San Diego was the hub of a lot of military manufacturing, Convair and those kinds of companies that were in San Diego early, and you're saying they're coming back, and how is that impacting the economy and the other jobs that are all the way around it that are supporting that?
Well, it's great. I mean, manufacturing coming back to San Diego County, in particular East County, one thing people have to remember is for every manufacturing job, there's typically 3.5 jobs for the supply chain. So every manufacturing, like every machinist that we have, supports 3.5 additional jobs through our supply chain, and Taylor Guitars and others are very similar.
I know there's been a lot of controversy about, you know, overseas and things like that, but the Mexico connection has worked very well for San Diego County manufacturing companies. Taylor has a plant in Tecate as well.
Sure.
Tell me how that works with some of the companies that you're involved with.
Well, I think part of it is there's a lower cost, you know, there's a lower cost option right next door, where you're able to actually then take some of the production into that lower cost market, yet still manage it in San Diego, and maybe you're going to do some of the more complicated or technical stuff right here in San Diego, but you're still so closely connected. We're in a very unique spot in San Diego compared to the rest of the country with Mexico so close to us.
Is there a geographical reason why, for example, transportation, shipping, and that sort of thing, is that also an advantage?
I think that's an advantage. For us, we don't really see that as much, but there's a lot of our customers are here locally. So our end customer happens to be here locally, you know, so we actually produce a lot, and about probably 2/3 of what we produce stays here in San Diego, goes to our customer, which then might ship it overseas.
Let's talk a little bit about the skill, because I noticed that, especially at Taylor Guitar, these are very skilled jobs. These are skilled craftsmen, I guess. There's not a better word than being called a skilled craftsman, which is what these people are. What does that do to the economy of El Cajon, the quality of life that you have in El Cajon when you have these highly skilled workers working in your area?
Well, really, I mean, they have, you know, they call it, you know, jobs that are head of household jobs, you know, and our careers. I mean, the problem is really finding enough skilled people. I mean, really, you can't. There's not enough job. There are more than enough jobs. There's just not enough people. one of the things we've done in our organization is we've started our own nonprofit as a training academy in order to find people, and we only hire about half of them, and the other half of them go to other manufacturers around the region.
So tell me about your company. You also manufacture. It's called Quality Controlled. What is that?
It's quality controlled manufacturing. We make parts for aerospace, defense, the space industry, and the gas and oil industries. Really, we make a lot of cool stuff out of metal, to put it in a different way.
Okay.
And we make some of the most difficult parts that are on, your airplanes and in the turbine engines, the hot section of engines, and so forth.
How do you start something like that? Because I know with Bob Taylor, his passion for building guitars, that was his passion. And I told the story earlier about how I had connected with Bob Taylor at Deering Banjo. So you had a banjo maker, and you had a guitar maker, and somehow Deering's still in business, and Taylor exploded into this global business, and of course Deering's now a global business as well. How did it start for you?
The founder of the company, Bob Grandy, started in his garage. He just started with one machine, wanted to make stuff with his hands, and slowly grew from there. So in 40 years, it's gone from no employees or one employees to about 105 employees. Very similar to Taylor Guitars, but just on a smaller scale. And
now there's something in El Cajon called Manufacturing Days. Tell me about that. What is that?
Yeah, Manufacturing Day actually is a national program. It's been about 6 years in place. October 5th, I believe, is the date. But in San Diego, we're the largest participating region. In fact, it's now become a manufacturing week. In East County, the Economic Development Council has a manufacturing expo on Tuesday of that week, October 2nd. And last year we had about 400 people. This year we're expecting about 500 people and about 30 manufacturers to show what they do.
And what happens there? What do we typically see at the expo?
You'll see everybody what they make. You'll have, there's people that can find work if they're looking for employment. There's companies like us and others that will be there to try to find employment. There's other resources that help manufacturing, supply chain people, and others that will be there. It's actually at the Air Museum, the Allen Air Museum, so you get to see a great location with all kinds of fun airplanes and stuff around there. So it's a really fantastic, event. It's the third year, and it's the largest single-day event in Manufacturing Week.
And I see that it's free to the public.
It's free to the public. Yeah,
excellent.
Absolutely.
Well, we appreciate you being here, Rick, so much. Rick Urban, of course, the Manufacturing and East County representative. And I had one last question. Do you play the guitar?
I do not play the guitar. I wish I did.
Have you been to Taylor Guitars?
I have taken the tour, yes. It's fantastic.
It's pretty amazing when you walk through there and you realize that they make guitars, and a lot of those folks don't play guitar. It doesn't matter because high quality reigns supreme there in El Cajon. Thanks so much for being here with us, and appreciate you all being with us for San Diego People. That's it for this morning edition of San Diego People. Join us tonight for the KUSI News at 6, 10, and 11. I'm Carlos Amezcua. Thanks so much for being with us.